The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in courtroom 4B, casting harsh white light on the worn wooden benches. Candace Washington sat at the defendant's table, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed down her green blouse. The fabric was clean but showed signs of wear at the collar. Behind her, in the gallery, sat her 5-year-old daughter Nia, wearing a bright blue dress that Candace had ironed that morning despite everything falling apart around them. "Mrs. Washington," Judge Patricia Harrison said, her voice carrying the weight of difficult decisions made too many times before. "I've reviewed your case thoroughly. While I sympathize with your medical situation and the hardship you've endured, the law is clear. You owe Mr. Bernard Cole 6 months of back rent totaling $12,000. Candace stood up slowly, her legs still aching from the accident that had changed everything. "Your Honor, I've been back at work for 3 weeks now. I can start making payments. I just need time." Mr. Cole sat in his wheelchair near the plaintiff's table, his attorney Frank Brennan standing beside him with a stack of documents. Cole's face was stern, unmoved by Candace's plea. He had been in that wheelchair for 5 years, and those years had hardened something inside him. "Your Honor," Attorney Brennan spoke up, his voice crisp and professional. "Mr. Cole has been more than patient. 6 months without rent payment is substantial. He has bills to pay, property maintenance costs. My client requires immediate payment or possession of the property." Lisa Chong, the court-appointed attorney sitting beside Candace, stood up. "Your Honor, Mrs. Washington is a single mother with an exemplary work history. She was injured through no fault of her own. She's asking for a reasonable payment plan." Judge Harrison looked down at the papers before her, then at Candace, then at little Nia sitting so quietly in the gallery. The child's eyes were wide, taking in everything, understanding far more than most 5-year-olds should have to understand. "Mrs. Washington, do you have any family who can help? Anyone who can guarantee the debt?" Candace shook her head slowly, fighting back tears. "No, Your Honor. My parents passed away years ago. I have a cousin in Atlanta, but she's struggling herself." Mrs. Gwendolyn Pierce, the social worker assigned to the case, sat in the front row. Her presence there meant something terrible. It meant that if Candace lost their apartment, someone would need to make sure Nia had a place to go. The thought made Candace's stomach twist into knots. "Mrs. Washington, I'm going to give you 30 days to come up with the full amount or establish a guaranteed payment plan acceptable to Mr. Cole. If you cannot do so..." Judge Harrison paused, clearly uncomfortable with what came next. "Mrs. Pierce will need to evaluate alternative living arrangements for your daughter until you can establish stable housing." The words hit Candace like a physical blow. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. 30 days. $12,000. It might as well have been $1 million. "All parties will return on March 15th for a final determination," Judge Harrison said, raising her gavel. "Wait." A small voice cut through the courtroom. Everyone turned. Little Nia had stood up in the gallery, her hands pressed flat against the wooden railing that separated the seating area from the court floor. Her bright blue dress stood out like a beacon under the harsh lights. "Young lady, please sit down," the bailiff said gently, moving toward her. But Nia didn't sit. She looked directly at Mr. Cole in his wheelchair, her 5-year-old face serious and determined in a way that made several people in the courtroom shift uncomfortably. "Mr. Cole," Nia said, her voice clear and steady, "let go of my mother and I'll make you walk." The courtroom went completely silent for 3 full seconds. Then someone in the back laughed. The sound broke the spell, and suddenly the gallery erupted in nervous laughter and whispers. Even Attorney Brennan smiled and shook his head. "The child doesn't understand," Brennan said dismissively. "Your Honor, perhaps." But Judge Patricia Harrison wasn't laughing. She was standing up, staring at the little girl with an expression that silenced the entire courtroom faster than any gavel could have. "Bailiff, bring the child forward," Judge Harrison said quietly. Candace turned in her seat, her face pale. "Nia, baby, please." "It's all right, Mrs. Washington," the judge said, her tone softer now. "I'd like to hear what your daughter has to say." The bailiff helped Nia through the gate. The little girl walked to the front of the courtroom, her small shoes clicking on the tile floor. She stood before the judge's bench, having to tilt her head all the way back to look up. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Judge Harrison asked, leaning forward. "Nia Washington, ma'am." "Nia, that's a beautiful name. Now, can you tell me what you meant when you said you could make Mr. Cole walk?" Nia turned to look at Mr. Cole, who was watching her now with a mixture of curiosity and irritation. "My mama is a nurse. She brings home books and videos about medicine sometimes. I watch them with her. Last week we were at the grocery store and I saw Mr. Cole there. The way his legs move when he tries to shift in his chair. It's not like the people in Mama's videos who have spine injuries. His legs respond. They just don't have strength. The courtroom had gone silent again, but this time no one was laughing. Dr. Rachel Foster, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom waiting for a completely different case, leaned forward with sudden interest. Julian Mitchell, a tall man in an expensive suit with a red tie, sat 3 rows behind Candace. He had been in the courthouse on other business, had wandered into this courtroom to kill time before his own appointment. He had been watching the proceedings with mild interest, but now his full attention was focused on the small girl in the blue dress. "Your Honor," Attorney Brennan interjected. "This is absurd. The child is 5 years old. She has no medical training, no." "Let her finish," Judge Harrison said firmly. "Nia, go on." "In Mama's videos they talk about different kinds of injuries and different kinds of treatments. Some people can't walk because their nerves are cut. But some people can't walk because their muscles forgot how, or because something is pressing on their nerves that could maybe be fixed. I don't know which one Mr. Cole is, but if he's the second kind." Nia trailed off, suddenly looking shy. "Mama always says that hope and kindness can heal things that medicine alone can't. Maybe Mr. Cole needs both." Candace was crying now, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to be proud of her daughter's courage and compassion, but she was terrified of what would happen next. 30 days. $12,000. The numbers kept spinning through her mind. Mr. Cole stared at the little girl, his expression unreadable. 5 years in this chair. 5 years of doctors telling him nothing more could be done. 5 years of watching his savings drain away. Of becoming harder and more bitter, of having to make difficult choices about his rental property just to survive. Julian Mitchell stood up and quietly made his way to the front of the courtroom. Judge Harrison noticed him but didn't stop him. "Your Honor, may I approach?" Julian asked. "And you are?" "Julian Mitchell. I run the Mitchell Foundation. We provide assistance to families facing medical and financial hardship." He looked at Candace, then at Nia, then at Mr. Cole. "I'd like to speak with all parties after these proceedings conclude, if that's acceptable." Before anyone could answer, Judge Harrison spoke. "Mr. Mitchell, your foundation's work is well known. However, I need to complete this hearing." She turned to Mr. Cole. "Mr. Cole, you've been quiet. Would you like to respond to what this child has said?" Bernard Cole looked down at his hands, then at Nia, then at Candace. Something in his expression had shifted. The hardness was still there, but there were cracks in it now. "Your Honor," he said slowly, "I'd like a recess. I'd like to speak with Mr. Mitchell." Have you ever watched someone's entire world balance on the edge of a single moment, knowing that hope was the only thing keeping them from falling? If this story is touching your heart, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a child's wisdom change everything? Let us know below. Judge Harrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll take a 30-minute recess. All parties are to remain in the building." As the courtroom emptied, Candace pulled Nia into her arms, holding her daughter tight. Over Nia's shoulder, she saw Julian Mitchell talking quietly with Mr. Cole, saw the way the older man's face changed as he listened, saw something she hadn't seen before, possibility. But none of them knew yet that this was just the beginning. That Nia's simple act of compassion in that courtroom would set in motion a series of events that would change not just her family's life, but the lives of everyone present that day. The story of how they got to this moment and where they would go from here began 6 months earlier on an ordinary Tuesday evening when Candace Washington kissed her daughter goodnight and headed out for a late shift at Community General Hospital, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. 6 months before the courtroom drama, life looked completely different for Candace and Nia Washington. Their apartment at 412 Riverside Court wasn't fancy, but it was home. Candace had made sure of that. The walls were painted a warm cream color, and Nia's drawings covered the refrigerator in a colorful collage of crayon masterpieces. A small bookshelf in the living room held medical textbooks alongside picture books, and the kitchen table served double duty as both dining area and study space. "Mama, can I quiz you?" Nia asked on that particular Tuesday evening, looking up from her coloring book. She was working on a picture of a hospital, complete with tiny stick-figure nurses in green uniforms. Candace smiled as she pulled on her scrubs for the evening shift. The green fabric was comfortable and professional, worn soft from hundreds of washings. "Baby, I need to get to work. Mrs. Henderson from next door is going to watch you until I get back, remember?" "I know, but just one question. Please?" Nia held up her small hand with one finger extended. "All right, one question." Nia picked up one of Candace's study guides, opened it to a random page and squinted at the words. What is tachycardia? That's when someone's heart beats too fast, Candace answered, kneeling down to Nia's level. More than 100 beats per minute when they're resting. Is it dangerous? It can be, depending on what's causing it. That's why nurses like Mama need to recognize it quickly and help the doctors figure out the treatment. Candace kissed Nia's forehead. Now, you be good for Mrs. Henderson, okay? I'll be home before you wake up. Will you check on me when you get back? Always, baby. Always. It was their routine, one they'd perfected over the 3 years since Candace had started working at Community General Hospital. The nursing job paid better than her previous work as a medical assistant, and it came with benefits that covered Nia's healthcare and dental. More importantly, it was a step toward Candace's real dream, becoming a physician assistant. The dream felt closer now than it ever had before. Candace had been accepted into the PA program at State University, set to start in the fall. Classes would be at night and on weekends, which meant she could keep her nursing job and still be there for Nia during the days. It would be hard, maybe the hardest thing she'd ever done, but Candace had never been afraid of hard work. Mrs. Henderson knocked on the door at 6:30, right on time. She was a kind woman in her 70s, a retired teacher who loved Nia like a granddaughter. Ready for our reading night? She asked Nia, who nodded enthusiastically. Thank you so much, Mrs. Henderson, Candace said, grabbing her purse and keys. There's leftover chicken and rice in the fridge if she gets hungry, but she already ate dinner. We'll be just fine. You go save some lives. Candace drove to the hospital in her aging Honda Civic, windows down to enjoy the mild September evening. The car had 180,000 miles on it, but it ran reliably and that was all she needed. The radio played soft music as she navigated the familiar streets of the city, past the small parks and corner stores that made up her neighborhood. Community General Hospital was a mid-sized facility that served the working-class neighborhoods on the east side. It wasn't glamorous, but the staff was dedicated and Candace loved her work there. She loved the patients, loved the feeling of making a real difference in people's lives every single day. Her shift that night was in the cardiac care unit, where she'd been working for the past 8 months. It was demanding work, requiring constant attention and quick thinking, but Candace thrived on it. She was known among the staff as someone who never missed a detail, who caught problems before they became emergencies. Hey, Candace, her colleague Lauren called out when she arrived. Lauren was a veteran nurse, 20 years on the job, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. We've got a full house tonight. 3 post-op, 2 admissions, and Mr. Jameson in room 4 is being difficult again. Candace laughed. When is Mr. Jameson not difficult? The night progressed in the usual rhythm of hospital work. Vital signs checked, medications administered, call buttons answered, worried family members reassured. At midnight, Candace took her break in the small staff lounge, using the 30 minutes to study her PA program materials. She wanted to be ready when classes started. By 3 in the morning, things had quieted down. Most patients were sleeping, and the overnight skeleton crew moved through the hallways with practiced efficiency. Candace was documenting her notes at the nurse's station when Dr. Patterson stopped by. Candace, I heard you got accepted into the PA program, he said, genuine pleasure in his voice. That's wonderful. You're going to be great at it. Thank you, Dr. Patterson. I'm nervous but excited. You should be excited. You're one of the best nurses I've worked with. Patients trust you, and that's worth its weight in gold. He paused, then added, if you need a recommendation letter for anything, let me know. I appreciate that more than you know. The conversation warmed Candace's heart as she finished her shift and headed out to the parking lot at 6:30 in the morning. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. She thought about Nia, probably just waking up now, and about Mrs. Henderson making breakfast. She thought about the PA program, about the better future she was building for both of them. She never saw the other car running the red light. The impact came from the passenger side, a violent crushing sound followed by the sensation of spinning, of airbags deploying, of glass breaking. Candace's world turned into a chaos of sound and pain and fear. Her last conscious thought before everything went dark was of Nia, of who would take care of her daughter, of whether she'd ever see that sweet face again. When Candace woke up in the emergency room, disoriented and hurting, the first face she saw was Lauren's. Her colleague was in street clothes now, off duty, but she'd stayed at the hospital when she heard about the accident. Your daughter is fine, Lauren said immediately, knowing that would be Candace's first question. Mrs. Henderson has her. The police contacted her. Nia doesn't know yet. We wanted you to be able to talk to her first. What happened to me? Broken left leg, 3 fractured ribs, severe bruising. The leg required surgery. They put in a rod and pins. You're going to be okay, Candace, but you're going to need time to heal. At least 6 to 8 weeks before you can put full weight on that leg. 6 to 8 weeks. The words echoed in Candace's mind. 6 to 8 weeks without work. Without income beyond whatever sick leave she had accumulated, which wasn't much. 6 to 8 weeks of medical bills piling up. And the car? She hadn't even asked about the car yet. The Honda is totaled, Lauren said gently, reading her mind. The other driver's insurance should cover it, but these things take time. Time. That word again. Time was something Candace suddenly had too much of and not enough of simultaneously. Time to heal, but not enough time to figure out how to pay rent, how to get groceries, how to manage everything that needed managing. When they finally let Mrs. Henderson bring Nia to visit, Candace held herself together long enough to smile and reassure her daughter that everything would be fine. Nia climbed carefully onto the hospital bed, avoiding her mother's injured leg, and laid her head on Candace's chest. "Does it hurt bad, Mama?" "A little, baby. But the doctors gave me medicine to help. I'm going to be okay." "When can you come home?" "A few more days. Then I'll need to rest at home for a while. But we'll be together." What Candace didn't say, what she couldn't say with Nia right there, was how terrified she was. The medical bills would be substantial, even with insurance. She wouldn't be able to work for weeks. The PA program would have to be deferred, maybe indefinitely. And the rent? The rent was due in 2 weeks and she had no idea how she was going to pay it. That night, alone in her hospital room, Candace let herself cry. Not from the physical pain, though that was real enough, but from the overwhelming weight of everything that had just collapsed around her. She had worked so hard to build a stable life for Nia, to create opportunities to move forward. And now, because of one moment, one car running one red light, it was all falling apart. She didn't know it yet, but in the apartment building where she lived, Mr. Bernard Cole was looking at his accounts, calculating expenses, making hard decisions. He'd been lenient with tenants before, but those days were behind him. His own medical bills from his accident 5 years ago had taught him that sentiment didn't pay the bills. When Candace's rent came due and went unpaid, he would have no choice but to take action. The collision of these two lives, both shaped by medical tragedy, both struggling to survive, would lead inevitably to that courtroom 6 months later. But for now, Candace held on to the one thing she still had: hope. Hope that somehow, someway she would find a path through this. Hope that love and determination would be enough. Outside her hospital window, the city continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to individual struggles. But somewhere in that same city, Julian Mitchell was reviewing applications for his foundation's next round of assistance. And Dr. Rachel Foster was finishing a research paper on new treatments for spinal injuries that could help people doctors had given up on. The pieces were in place. The story was beginning. And little Nia, sleeping at home with Mrs. Henderson watching over her, dreamed of her mother coming home healthy and strong, completely unaware that she herself would one day be the one to change everything. The first month after the accident was the hardest. Candace came home from the hospital to an apartment that suddenly felt like a prison. The 3 flights of stairs to their 3rd-floor unit became a mountain she had to conquer on crutches, each step sending jolts of pain through her injured leg. Mrs. Henderson and Lauren took turns helping with Nia, bringing groceries, making sure Candace made it to her follow-up appointments. The disability payments from her job helped, but they only covered 60% of her regular salary. Candace watched her savings account drain week by week. The accident settlement would eventually come through, the lawyers assured her, but these things took time. There was that word again, time. She had plenty of time sitting at home healing, but not enough time before the bills came due. Nia adapted to the new reality with the resilience of childhood. She learned to be quieter during the day when her mother needed to rest. She helped where she could, bringing water, fetching the remote control, reading her picture books allowed to keep Candace company. On good days, they would sit together at the kitchen table, and Candace would teach Nia things from her medical books, simplifying the concepts until a 5-year-old could understand. "Why do people get hurt, Mama?" Nia asked one afternoon about 3 weeks after the accident. "Sometimes it's accidents like what happened to me. Sometimes people get sick. Bodies are amazing, baby, but they're not perfect. They can break. But the wonderful thing is that bodies can also heal." "Will your leg heal all the way?" "Yes, it will. It's going to take time, but I'll be able to walk normally again." "What about people who can't walk at all? Can they heal too?" The question seemed random, but Candace had learned that Nia's mind made connections in unexpected ways. Some can, with the right treatment. Some injuries are too severe. It depends on what happened and how quickly they get help. Nia absorbed this information the way she absorbed everything, filing it away in that curious, observant mind. She went back to her coloring, but Candace could see her daughter was still thinking. The second month was when things started to fall apart financially. The first rent check Candace wrote came from her dwindling savings. She called Mr. Cole's property management line and left a message explaining her situation, asking if they could work out a temporary payment plan. No one called her back. The second month's rent came due, and Candace simply didn't have the money. She'd paid the utilities, the insurance premiums, bought groceries, covered Nia's childcare costs for the days when neither Mrs. Henderson nor Lauren could help. There wasn't enough left over. She tried calling Mr. Cole's office again. This time someone answered. Mr. Cole doesn't do payment plans, the voice on the other end said, bored and bureaucratic. Rent is due on the 1st of the month. If you can't pay, you'll need to vacate. But I've been a tenant for 3 years. I've never been late before. I was in an accident. I'm a single mother. I just need a little time. I'll pass your message along to Mr. Cole. That message apparently went nowhere. A week later, the first eviction notice appeared on Candace's door. It was a formal legal document, cold and impersonal, giving her 30 days to pay all outstanding rent or vacate the premises. Candace stood in her doorway, leaning on one crutch, holding the notice in her shaking hand. Mrs. Henderson found her there 10 minutes later, tears streaming down her face. Oh honey, the older woman said, taking the paper and reading it. This isn't right. This isn't right at all. I don't know what to do. I can't go back to work for at least another 3 weeks. Even then, I'll need physical therapy. How am I supposed to come up with 2 months of rent plus late fees when I can barely cover our basic expenses? Mrs. Henderson helped her inside and sat her down at the kitchen table. Have you looked into assistance programs? The hospital must have social workers who can help. I've called everyone. There are waiting lists, application processes. Nothing moves fast enough. Candace put her head in her hands. What am I going to do? Where will we go? That evening, after Nia was asleep, Candace made a list of everyone she knew who might be able to help. The list was painfully short. Her parents were gone, both lost to cancer within 2 years of each other. Her cousin in Atlanta had 3 kids of her own and was barely making ends meet. Her co-workers at the hospital had already helped so much, bringing food and covering childcare. She couldn't ask them for money too. Lauren called that night as she did most evenings to check in. When Candace told her about the eviction notice, Lauren was quiet for a moment. I have about $2,000 saved up, Lauren said finally. It's not much, but it's yours if you need it. Lauren, no. I can't take your savings. Yes, you can. You'd do the same for me. I can't pay you back. Not for months, maybe longer. I'm not asking you to pay me back. I'm asking you to let me help. This was what made what happened next so hard. Everything in Candace wanted to refuse, to stand on her own, to not burden anyone else with her problems. But she thought about Nia sleeping in the next room, about the eviction notice on the counter, about the very real possibility of losing their home. Okay, Candace whispered, the word feeling like defeat and gratitude all mixed together. Thank you. I'll pay you back, Lauren. I promise. I know you will. That's not what I'm worried about. Lauren's $2,000 bought them another month. Candace paid what she could toward the back rent and used the rest to keep the utilities on and food on the table. She went back to work earlier than her doctor recommended, limping through her shifts, taking pain medication to get through the days. The physical therapy she was supposed to be doing consistently got pushed aside because there simply weren't enough hours in the day. Her leg didn't heal properly. She could walk, but with a pronounced limp and persistent pain. The orthopedic surgeon warned her that she'd need another procedure eventually if she didn't give her body time to heal. But what choice did she have? Nia noticed, of course. Children always notice more than adults give them credit for. Mama, your leg is hurting again, she said one evening, watching Candace wince as she stood up from the couch. It's okay, baby. Just a little sore. You're not supposed to work yet, the doctor said. The doctor doesn't have to pay our rent, sweetheart. The words came out sharper than Candace intended, and she immediately regretted it. I'm sorry, Nia. Mama's just tired. Nia was quiet for a moment, then said something that broke Candace's heart. Is it my fault you have to work? Because you have to take care of me? No, baby. No, no, no. Candace pulled Nia into a tight hug, fighting back tears. None of this is your fault. You are the best thing in my whole life. Everything I do because I love you and I want us to have a good life together. Do you understand? Nia nodded against her mother's chest, but Candace could feel the tension in her daughter's small body, the worry that no 5-year-old should have to carry. By the third month, Candace was 3 months behind on rent and still couldn't catch up. Her leg wasn't healing right. Her work performance was suffering because of the pain and the stress. The PA program she'd been accepted into sent a letter asking if she still planned to attend. She wrote back requesting a deferment. Mr. Cole's patience, such as it was, had run out. The second eviction notice came with a court date. Candace would have to appear before a judge and explain why she shouldn't be forced to leave her home. That's when Mrs. Gwendolyn Pierce entered their lives. She was a social worker with Child Protective Services, assigned to evaluate Nia's living situation. If Candace lost the apartment, they needed to ensure Nia would have a safe place to stay. Mrs. Pierce was a kind woman, professional but warm. She interviewed Candace extensively, visited the apartment, observed her interactions with Nia. Her report would be fair, Candace knew, but fair didn't change the facts. If they were evicted, Candace didn't have another place lined up. The shelters were full, and her credit was too damaged now to qualify for another apartment right away. What happens to Nia if I can't find housing? Candace asked during one of their meetings. Mrs. Pierce's face was sympathetic but honest. We would explore temporary placement with relatives first. If that's not possible, we'd look at foster care until you get back on your feet. Foster care. The word sent ice through Candace's veins. She thought of Nia being taken away, put in a stranger's home, wondering why her mother had abandoned her. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. It was during this darkest period that Candace first heard about Julian Mitchell. She was in the hospital cafeteria on her lunch break, barely touching her food, when she overheard two administrators talking at the next table. Did you hear? The Mitchell Foundation donated another $1 million to the expansion project. Julian Mitchell is something else. I heard he started that foundation after his sister died because she couldn't afford treatment. Now he just gives money away to anyone who needs help. Not just anyone. They have an application process. But yeah, he's helped a lot of families in this city. Candace looked up the Mitchell Foundation that night on the library computer since her internet had been shut off to save money. The foundation's website listed their mission: providing financial assistance to families facing medical and financial hardship. There was an application form, pages long, requiring documentation of income, expenses, medical records, everything. Candace printed the application and spent the next week filling it out, gathering documents, writing an explanation of her situation. She mailed it off with a prayer and tried not to let herself hope too much. The foundation probably got thousands of applications. What were the chances they'd help her? But she had to try. For Nia, she had to try everything. The court date loomed. Candace hired a court-appointed attorney, Lisa Chong, who was sympathetic but realistic. The law is on the landlord's side, Lisa explained. You owe money. You can't pay. Unless you can come up with the full amount or get the landlord to agree to a payment plan, the judge will order eviction. Can we try to negotiate with Mr. Cole? We can try. But from what I've seen in the paperwork, he's not interested in negotiating. Candace decided to meet Mr. Cole in person. She found his address through public records and went to his house one Saturday morning, Nia in tow because she had no one to watch her. The house was modest, a single-story home with a wheelchair ramp leading to the front door. When Mr. Cole answered, Candace was struck by how tired he looked. He was probably in his late 50s, African-American, with gray threading through his hair. The wheelchair he sat in was worn but well-maintained. Mr. Cole, I'm Candace Washington. I rent Unit 412 at Riverside Court. His expression hardened. I know who you are. You're 3 months behind on rent. I know. I was in an accident. I couldn't work. I'm asking you, please, can we work out a payment plan? I'm back at work now. I can pay you something each month plus current rent. It'll take time, but I'll pay every penny I owe. I've heard that before from other tenants. They pay for a month or two then stop again. Meanwhile, I'm stuck with the lost income. I'm not other tenants. I've lived there for 3 years without a single late payment. Until now. Mr. Cole's voice was flat. Look, Ms. Washington, I'm sorry about your accident. But I have expenses too. Medical expenses. You see this chair? You think I wanted to end up like this? I was a contractor. I fell from a scaffold 5 years ago. The insurance covered some of it but not enough. I've got bills. I've got treatments I can't afford. That rental property is my income. I can't afford to carry tenants who don't pay. Candace felt a surge of compassion even through her desperation. Here was someone else whose life had been destroyed by an accident, someone else struggling to survive. I understand, Mr. Cole. I really do. But I have a 5-year-old daughter. Please, I'm begging you. Give me a chance. Mr. Cole looked at Nia, who stood quietly beside her mother, holding Candace's hand. Something flickered across his face, but then it was gone. "I'll see you in court, Ms. Washington. Bring the money you owe or bring moving boxes." The door closed, and Candace stood there for a long moment before leading Nia back to the bus stop. They couldn't afford the car repairs yet, so they relied on public transportation now. "Mama, why won't that man help us?" Nia asked on the bus ride home. "Because he has problems too, baby. Sometimes people who are hurting hurt other people without meaning to. But we're hurting too." "I know, sweetheart. I know." That night, Candace calculated her finances one more time, hoping she'd made an error somewhere, hoping there was money she'd forgotten about. There wasn't. She had 2 weeks until the court date and about $4,000 to her name after paying bills. She owed $12,000 in back rent. It was impossible. There was no way out. But Candace Washington hadn't survived her parents' deaths, hadn't raised a daughter alone, hadn't worked her way through nursing school without learning how to fight. She would show up in that courtroom with her head held high. She would tell her truth. And if she lost, if they took Nia away temporarily, then she would work every hour of every day until she got her daughter back. What Candace didn't know was that her application to the Mitchell Foundation had caught someone's attention. That Julian Mitchell himself had read her story and put her file in a special stack on his desk. That he'd been planning to reach out to her but had been waiting for the right moment. And she definitely didn't know that he would happen to be in that courthouse on the day of her hearing, would wander into that courtroom, would hear her daughter speak words that would change everything. Sometimes the moment when everything changes doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as an ending, when it's actually a beginning. For Candace and Nia Washington, that moment was coming. And with it would come a chance at something they'd almost stopped believing in: hope. The morning of the court date arrived cold and clear, one of those early March days where winter was losing its grip but hadn't quite let go. Candace dressed carefully in her best outfit, a green blouse with navy slacks, both pressed and professional. She helped Nia into her bright blue dress, the one they'd bought last year for kindergarten pictures. If this was going to be one of their last days in their home, Candace wanted them both to look dignified. The courthouse was an imposing building downtown, all gray stone and tall columns. Candace held Nia's hand tightly as they climbed the steps, her leg aching from the effort. They were early, but Lisa Chong, her court-appointed attorney, was already waiting in the lobby. "Mrs. Washington," Lisa greeted them with a warm but professional smile. "And this must be Nia. How are you both holding up?" "We're managing," Candace said, which was the truth even if it wasn't the whole truth. "I've reviewed everything one more time. We have a solid case for hardship and your work record speaks for itself. But I need to be honest with you. Unless Mr. Cole agrees to a payment plan or you can come up with the full amount, Judge Harrison is going to rule in his favor." "I understand." Candace had understood this for weeks now. Understanding didn't make it easier. They took the elevator to the 4th floor and found courtroom 4B. The hallway outside was busy with other people waiting for their cases. Evictions, small claims, traffic violations. So many people fighting their own battles, Candace thought. She wasn't alone in struggling, even if it felt that way sometimes. Mr. Cole arrived with his attorney, Frank Brennan, 15 minutes before the hearing. He wheeled himself down the hallway and Candace noticed what she hadn't before. The effort it took him to maneuver, the strain in his shoulders, the way he had to adjust his position constantly to stay comfortable. He was in pain, she realized. Chronic pain, the kind that wore you down day after day until it changed who you were. Their eyes met briefly. Neither smiled. What was there to smile about? Mrs. Gwendolyn Pierce arrived just before they were called in. She nodded at Candace reassuringly, but her presence was a reminder of what was at stake. Not just the apartment, but Nia's placement if Candace couldn't provide stable housing. "All rise," the bailiff called as they entered the courtroom. The Honorable Judge Patricia Harrison presiding. Judge Harrison was a woman in her late 50s with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore glasses that sat low on her nose, and her expression was thoughtful rather than stern. Candace felt a small flutter of hope. Maybe this judge would understand. Maybe compassion wasn't dead in the legal system. Case number 2024 EV 3847, Bernard Cole versus Candace Washington, the court clerk announced. Attorney Brennan stood first. He was good at his job, Candace had to admit. He laid out the facts clearly and without unnecessary drama. Tenant 3 months behind on rent, total amount owed $12,000, landlord's repeated attempts to communicate, tenant's failure to pay. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of non-payment," Brennan concluded. "Mr. Cole sympathizes with Ms. Washington's situation, but he has a right to collect rent for his property. He has expenses of his own and cannot afford to provide free housing. Judge Harrison made notes, then turned to Lisa Chang. Counselor? Lisa stood and presented Candace's side. The accident, the medical expenses, the return to work, the attempt to negotiate a payment plan. She submitted Candace's work history, letters of recommendation from supervisors at the hospital, documentation of the accident and medical treatment. Mrs. Washington is not a deadbeat tenant, Your Honor. She's a hard-working single mother who experienced a medical emergency. She's asking for the opportunity to make this right through a reasonable payment plan. Mr. Cole has refused to negotiate a payment plan? Judge Harrison asked. Correct, Your Honor. The judge looked at Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, is there a reason you're unwilling to accept payments over time? Mr. Cole's attorney started to answer, but Mr. Cole held up a hand. Your Honor, may I speak? Go ahead, Mr. Cole. I don't like being in this position. I don't enjoy taking someone to court. But I'm living on disability income and the rent from my 2 properties. 3 months of lost income is significant for me. I've been in this chair for 5 years because of my own accident. I understand hardship. But I also understand that if I start making exceptions, where does it stop? I have another tenant who's 2 months behind. If I let Ms. Washington slide, how do I justify not helping him too? I'm not a wealthy man, Your Honor. I'm just trying to survive. It was honest, Candace had to give him that. And it wasn't wrong. But it also didn't solve her problem. Judge Harrison nodded slowly. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Cole. Ms. Washington, would you like to address the court? Candace stood, her legs trembling slightly. Your Honor, everything Mr. Cole said about me is true. I do owe that money. I was behind on rent because I physically couldn't work. But I'm back at work now. I'm making my current rent payments. If Mr. Cole would accept $300 a month toward the back rent on top of my regular rent, I could have him paid back in 3 years. 3 years is a long time, Ms. Washington. I know, Your Honor. But it's better than nothing, isn't it? I'm not trying to cheat anyone. I just need time. The problem is that legally, time isn't something I can give you without the landlord's agreement. And practically speaking, 3 years is a long time for Mr. Cole to wait for money he's owed. Mrs. Pierce was called to testify next. She spoke about her evaluation of Candace's parenting, which was glowing. She talked about Nia's adjustment, her performance in kindergarten, the strong mother-daughter bond. But she also had to address the practical reality. Your Honor, if Mrs. Washington loses her housing, I would work with her to find temporary placement for Nia while Mrs. Washington secures new housing. The goal would be reunification as soon as possible. Nia sat in the gallery, swinging her legs, not fully understanding what was happening but sensing the tension. Candace glanced back at her daughter and saw those big, trusting eyes looking at her. Nia believed her mother would fix this. Children always believed their parents could fix anything. The hearing continued with more back and forth, more documentation presented, more arguments made. Judge Harrison asked about Candace's prospects for other housing, about her savings, about whether she had family who could help. Each answer revealed how alone Candace truly was, how few resources she had. In the back of the courtroom, Julian Mitchell sat quietly, having slipped in when the hearing started. He'd been at the courthouse for a meeting about his foundation's work with the public defender's office when he'd seen Candace's name on the docket. He'd remembered her application, had been meaning to reach out. Now he sat and listened, his sharp mind taking in every detail. Mrs. Washington, Judge Harrison said after what felt like hours but had probably been 45 minutes. I've reviewed your case thoroughly. While I sympathize with your medical situation and the hardship you've endured, the law is clear. You owe Mr. Bernard Cole 6 months of back rent totaling $12,000. Wait, 6 months? Candace's mind caught on that. It was only 3 months. But before she could speak up, the judge continued. I'm going to give you 30 days to come up with the full amount or establish a guaranteed payment plan acceptable to Mr. Cole. If you cannot do so. Judge Harrison paused, and Candace saw genuine regret in her expression. Mrs. Pierce will need to evaluate alternative living arrangements for your daughter until you can establish stable housing. The words hit like a physical blow. 30 days. Alternative living arrangements. Her daughter. All parties will return on March 15th for a final determination, Judge Harrison said, reaching for her gavel. That's when Nia stood up. The rest happened as it had in the opening scene. Nia's voice cutting through the courtroom, her statement to Mr. Cole, the laughter, Judge Harrison standing up, the silence that followed. The judge calling Nia forward, asking her to explain, Nia's simple observation about Mr. Cole's condition. But now, sitting in this hearing, understanding how they'd arrived at this moment, the words carried even more weight. This wasn't just the child being cute or saying something random. This was Nia, who had spent months watching her mother struggle, who had learned about medicine at the kitchen table, who had absorbed more about hardship and hope than any 5-year-old should have to know. Julian Mitchell stood up during the recess, introducing himself, offering to speak with all parties. Mr. Cole, shaken by Nia's words, agreed. During the break, in a small conference room down the hall, Julian sat across from Candace, Nia, Mr. Cole, and both attorneys. Mrs. Pierce stood by the door listening. "Mrs. Washington," Julian said, his voice kind but direct. "I've been reviewing your foundation application. You should have heard from us weeks ago, but there was a delay in our office. I apologize for that." Candace blinked. "My application? I didn't think anyone would actually read it. We read every application. And yours stood out. Your work history, your dedication to your daughter, your efforts to better yourself through education. These are exactly the situations my foundation was created to help." "I don't understand. Are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd like to help. The foundation can pay your back rent in full and cover your medical expenses related to the accident. We can also provide temporary financial support while you get back on your feet fully." Candace stared at him, unable to process the words. This couldn't be real. People didn't just appear and solve your problems. That wasn't how life worked. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Because my sister died because she couldn't afford treatment for her illness. She was too proud to ask for help, and I was too young to understand how bad things were until it was too late. I started this foundation so that no one else would have to choose between their health and their home, between their dignity and their survival. Your pride has already cost you too much, Mrs. Washington. Please don't let it cost you any more. What would you do if a stranger offered to solve all your problems? Would you trust them? Could you let go of your pride long enough to accept help? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to see how this story unfolds." Tears streamed down Candace's face. "I'll pay you back. Every penny. I promise." "There's no debt here, Mrs. Washington. This is a grant, not a loan. Use the money to heal, to finish your PA program, to build the life you've been fighting for." Candace looked at Nia, who sat beside her with wide eyes. Then she looked at Julian Mitchell, at this stranger who was offering salvation without strings attached. Everything in her wanted to refuse, to say she'd handle it herself, to maintain her independence. But she thought about foster care, about losing Nia even temporarily, about the path her life was on if nothing changed. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by paying it forward someday. Help someone else when you're in a position to do so." Mr. Cole had been quiet through all of this, but now he spoke. "Wait. What the little girl said about me walking. Did she really see something, or was that just—" Dr. Rachel Foster, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom observing and had followed them to the conference room, spoke up. "I'm Dr. Rachel Foster. I specialize in spinal and neurological injuries. I'd like to examine you, Mr. Cole. I can't make any promises, but what your young friend observed intrigued me. There are new treatments available now that weren't options even a few years ago." "I can't afford new treatments," Mr. Cole said flatly. "I can barely afford my current care." Julian turned to him. "The foundation will cover your evaluation and any treatment Dr. Foster recommends. Consider it an apology for the circumstances that brought us all here today." Mr. Cole looked from Julian to Candace to Nia. His expression was complicated. Hope warring with disbelief, shame fighting against gratitude. "You do that? After I tried to evict her? You were protecting yourself, Mr. Cole. I understand that. But maybe today we can all protect each other instead." When they returned to the courtroom and explained the resolution to Judge Harrison, Candace saw the older woman's eyes get misty. This was clearly not the outcome the judge had expected when the day began. "Mr. Cole, are you withdrawing your eviction action?" "Yes, Your Honor. And I'd like to apologize to Mrs. Washington. I let my own pain make me blind to hers." "Mrs. Washington, do you accept Mr. Mitchell's assistance?" "Yes, Your Honor." "With gratitude." Judge Harrison smiled. "Then this case is dismissed. I'm also going to do something unusual. Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Cole, Dr. Foster, I'd like you all to return to this courtroom on June 15th. I want to know how this story ends." "It would be our honor, Your Honor," Julian said. As they left the courthouse, Nia held her mother's hand on one side and Julian's on the other, chattering excitedly about going home. Candace walked slowly, her injured leg aching, her mind reeling from everything that had happened. This morning she'd woken up facing homelessness and the possible loss of her daughter. Now, somehow, impossibly, everything had changed. Not because of her own strength or determination, though she'd shown plenty of both, but because her 5-year-old daughter had spoken words of compassion in a moment of crisis, and those words had opened doors Candace hadn't even known existed. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would still be challenges, still be healing that needed to happen, both physical and emotional. But for the first time in months, Candace felt something she'd almost forgotten: real, genuine hope. And in his wheelchair, heading to his van with Dr. Foster's business card in his pocket, Bernard Cole felt it too. The story of what happened in Courtroom 4B spread quickly through Community General Hospital. By the time Candace returned to work the following week, everyone had heard some version of it. Her colleagues stopped her in the hallways, wanting to know if it was true that a billionaire had paid off all her debts, that her daughter had performed some kind of medical miracle. It wasn't a miracle, Candace explained to Lauren over coffee in the break room. Nia just observed something that the rest of us were too distracted to see. She's always been like that, noticing details that adults miss. Still, what are the odds that Julian Mitchell would be in that exact courtroom at that exact time? I've stopped trying to calculate odds, Candace said with a tired smile. I'm just grateful. The gratitude was real, but so was the adjustment. Having her debts wiped away didn't erase the trauma of the months leading up to that courtroom moment. Candace still found herself waking up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, checking her bank account on her phone to make sure the money was really there. She still flinched every time she saw a notice on her door, even though they were just menus from local restaurants. Julian Mitchell's foundation had done exactly what he promised. The back rent was paid in full. The medical bills that had been sent to collections were settled. They'd even arranged for Candace's physical therapy to be covered at one of the best facilities in the city, not just the basic sessions her insurance provided. You need to heal properly this time, Julian had told her during one of their follow-up meetings. No cutting corners, no going back to work too soon. Your body needs time. Candace had wanted to argue that she couldn't afford to take more time off work, but Julian had already thought of that too. The foundation provided a stipend to cover her living expenses while she focused on recovery and her delayed PA program coursework. Why are you doing all this? Candace had asked him. The back rent was one thing, but this is so much more. Julian had looked at her seriously. Because I've learned that helping someone halfway doesn't actually help. You need space to breathe, to heal, to rebuild. Otherwise you're just delaying the next crisis. My foundation doesn't put band-aids on broken bones. We set the bone properly so it can heal right. Nia adjusted to their new reality faster than Candace did. She went back to being a typical 5-year-old, worrying about whether she'd get picked for show and tell and if they could get ice cream after school. But sometimes Candace would catch her daughter watching Mr. Cole's apartment building when they passed it, a thoughtful expression on her small face. What are you thinking about, baby? Candace asked one afternoon. Do you think Mr. Cole will really walk again? I don't know. We have to wait and see what the doctors say. But I was right about his legs moving different, wasn't I? You were very observant, yes. Nia was quiet for a moment, then said, Mama, when I'm big I want to help people like you do. Like the doctors do. Candace felt her heart swell. Then you study hard and stay curious about the world just like you are now. Keep noticing things, keep asking questions. That's how you learn to help people. The appointment with Dr. Rachel Foster for Mr. Cole happened 2 weeks after the court hearing. Julian had insisted that Candace and Nia be there, since Nia's observation had started everything. They met at the city's leading neurological center, a gleaming building that looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Mr. Cole arrived looking nervous, wheeling himself through the automatic doors with his jaw set tight. He dressed carefully in a maroon shirt and dark slacks, his hair freshly cut. Candace recognized the look. Someone trying to maintain dignity in a situation where they felt vulnerable. Mrs. Washington, he greeted her formally. Nia. Thank you for coming. Of course, Mr. Cole. We wanted to be here. Dr. Foster came out to the waiting room personally to collect them. She was a tall woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an air of competence that immediately put everyone at ease. Mr. Cole, it's good to see you again. And this must be our young medical observer. Nia nodded solemnly, suddenly shy in the face of so much adult attention. The examination took over 2 hours. Dr. Foster was thorough, asking questions about the original injury, reviewing old medical records Julian had helped collect, performing tests of sensation and reflexes. She had Mr. Cole move in specific ways, watching carefully, sometimes asking him to repeat a movement. Nia watched everything with intense focus. At one point, Dr. Foster noticed her attention and explained what she was doing. I'm checking to see if Mr. Cole's nerves are sending signals to his muscles properly. See how his foot moved just then? That tells me the connection between his brain and his foot is still there. So the road isn't broken, Nia said. Just blocked. Dr. Foster smiled. That's actually a perfect way to describe it. Yes, exactly. The road isn't broken. It's blocked. After the examination, Dr. Foster met with them in her office. She pulled up scans and images on her computer screen, pointing to specific areas as she explained. Mr. Cole, your original injury was a compression fracture of the L3 and L4 vertebrae. The standard treatment at the time was spinal fusion, which you underwent. However, I believe the surgery may have been too conservative. There's ongoing compression on your spinal cord that's preventing proper nerve function. Is that why I can't walk? Mr. Cole asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. Partially. But here's the good news, your nerves aren't dead. They're compressed and they've atrophied from lack of use, but they're not dead. What Nia observed in the grocery store was correct. Your muscles are responding to neural signals, just weakly. Can it be fixed? I believe so, but it's not a simple fix. You would need another surgery to address the compression, followed by at least 6 months of intensive physical therapy. The surgery has risks. There's no guarantee you'll regain full function. But I believe you have a good chance of regaining at least partial mobility, possibly full mobility. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the computer. Mr. Cole stared at the scans on the screen, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair. How much would this cost? He finally asked. The surgery and follow-up care would normally run about $200,000, Dr. Foster said honestly. However, the Mitchell Foundation has agreed to cover all costs. Mr. Cole turned to look at Julian, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the office. Why would you do that for me? I'm the one who tried to put them out on the street. You were trying to survive, Mr. Cole. I understand that. But this isn't about what you did or didn't do. This is about what's possible now. You have a chance to walk again. Why wouldn't we help you take that chance? I don't deserve this. None of us deserve the bad things that happen to us, Candace said quietly. My accident, your accident, the struggles we've both been through. We didn't deserve any of that. But we also don't deserve to keep suffering when there's a chance for something better. Mr. Mitchell is offering you that chance. Please take it. Mr. Cole looked at Candace, really looked at her for the first time since this whole ordeal began. He saw the limp she still had, the faint lines of pain around her eyes, the way she shifted her weight unconsciously to favor her good leg. He saw someone who understood what it meant to have your body betray you, to fight every day just to do normal things. You're taking his help, Mr. Cole said. You're letting the foundation support you. Yes. It was hard to accept at first. I wanted to handle everything on my own. But I realized that sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's wisdom. Mr. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned back to Dr. Foster. If I do this surgery, what are my actual chances? I need the truth, not optimism. Truthfully? I'd estimate you have a 70% chance of regaining enough function to walk with assistance, maybe a cane or walker. 40% chance of walking independently. 20% chance of returning to your pre-injury mobility levels. Those are honest numbers based on similar cases I've treated. And if I don't do the surgery? You'll continue as you are. The compression will likely worsen slowly over time. Eventually, you might lose the muscle response you still have. Mr. Cole nodded slowly, processing this information. He looked down at Nia, who had been sitting quietly beside her mother through all of this technical medical discussion. Young lady, he said to her. You really saw all that just from watching me in a grocery store? Nia nodded. Your legs wanted to move. They just didn't know how anymore. And you think this surgery will teach them again? I think Dr. Foster will clear the road, and then your legs will remember the way. The simple certainty in her voice seemed to settle something in Mr. Cole. He took a deep breath and turned to Dr. Foster. Okay, let's do it. When can we schedule the surgery? Dr. Foster smiled. I have an opening in 3 weeks. That'll give us time to run all the preoperative tests and get you properly prepared. 3 weeks, Mr. Cole repeated. After 5 years in this chair, 3 weeks seems like nothing. As they left the neurological center, Candace felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that Mr. Cole was getting help. Gratitude toward Julian for making it possible. But also something else, something harder to name. A sense that they were all connected now in ways that went beyond landlord and tenant, beyond helper and helped. They were people who had been broken by circumstances beyond their control, and who were now being given a chance to heal together. "Mama," Nia said as they walked to the bus stop, "can we visit Mr. Cole sometimes? Before his surgery? I think that would be nice, baby. Would you like that, Mr. Cole?" Mr. Cole, wheeling alongside them, looked surprised by the invitation. "You'd want to visit me? We're neighbors," Candace said simply. "And after everything that's happened, I think we could maybe be friends too." Something in Mr. Cole's expression softened. "I'd like that." Over the next 3 weeks, they visited Mr. Cole twice. Nia brought him drawings she'd made in kindergarten, bright colorful pictures of people walking and running. Mr. Cole put them up on his refrigerator, and Candace noticed that each time they visited, he seemed a little less guarded, a little more hopeful. The night before his surgery, Candace called him. "Just wanted to check on you," she said. "See if you needed anything." "I'm nervous," Mr. Cole admitted. "I keep thinking about what if it doesn't work. What if I go through all of this and I'm still in this chair at the end? Then you'll still be in the chair, but you'll know you tried. That's better than spending the rest of your life wondering what if." "Is that how you got through your recovery? Just kept telling yourself to try?" "That and having Nia to fight for. She's my reason for everything." "I don't have a daughter," Mr. Cole said quietly. "I don't have anyone really. My wife left after the accident. Said she couldn't handle it. My friends drifted away. It's been me in this chair for 5 years. You're not alone anymore, Mr. Cole. You have us now. And Dr. Foster. And Julian and the whole foundation team. We're all pulling for you." "Why? Why do you care what happens to me after what I did?" "Because caring is a choice, Mr. Cole. And it's a choice that makes us better people. Nia taught me that, watching her care about you even when you were trying to take our home away. She didn't hate you. She saw someone who was hurting and wanted to help. If a 5-year-old can choose kindness, then so can I." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Mr. Cole said, his voice thick with emotion, "Thank you, Mrs. Washington. For everything. For giving me a reason to hope again." "See you after the surgery," Candace said gently. "We'll be there when you wake up." And they were. When Bernard Cole opened his eyes in the recovery room, still groggy from anesthesia, the first face he saw was little Nia's, pressed close to the bed rail, watching him with those serious, observant eyes. "Hi, Mr. Cole," she whispered. "Dr. Foster says the surgery went really good. The road is clear now." Mr. Cole tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. A nurse helped him take a sip of water, and then he managed, "Is it really clear?" "Dr. Foster will explain everything when you're more awake," Candace said, sitting in the chair beside his bed. "But yes," she said, "it went very well. Better than expected. What happens now? Now you rest and heal. And then you start physical therapy. And then," Candace smiled, "then we see if Nia was right about you walking again." Mr. Cole reached out a shaky hand toward Nia. She took it carefully, her small hand disappearing in his larger one. "Thank you, little one," he said. "For seeing what everyone else missed. For caring when you had every reason not to." "It's okay, Mr. Cole," Nia said with the simple certainty of childhood. "People are supposed to help each other. That's what Mama always says." Candace blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the truth of her daughter's words, by the weight of kindness and hope in this sterile recovery room. They had all been so broken, all fighting their own battles, all convinced they had to survive alone. And maybe, just maybe, they were all learning that there was another way. The road ahead would be long. Mr. Cole's recovery would take months. Candace still had her own healing to do. But for the first time in a long time, none of them were walking that road alone. And sometimes that made all the difference. 3 days after Mr. Cole's surgery, Julian Mitchell sat in his downtown office, looking out over the city skyline. His foundation occupied the top floor of a modest building, nothing ostentatious, but the view was spectacular. He could see the neighborhoods where they'd helped families, the hospitals where they'd covered medical bills, the schools where they'd provided scholarships. His assistant knocked and entered. "Mr. Mitchell, you have a visitor. Mrs. Candace Washington. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." Julian looked up, surprised. "Send her in, please." Candace entered hesitantly, wearing her nurse's scrubs with a light jacket over them. She'd come straight from her shift at the hospital, and she looked tired but determined. "Mrs. Washington, please sit. Is everything all right? Is Nia okay?" "Nia's fine. Everyone's fine." Candace sat down, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I needed to talk to you and I didn't know how else to do it. You can always reach out to me. The foundation gave you all our contact information. I know, but this felt like something I needed to say in person. Candace took a deep breath. Mr. Mitchell, you've changed my life. You've changed Mr. Cole's life. And I can't help feeling like I need to understand why. What do you get out of all this? Julian was quiet for a moment, considering how to answer. He stood up and walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Did the foundation paperwork mention my sister? He finally asked. It mentioned that she died and that her death inspired you to start the foundation. But it didn't give details. Her name was Rebecca. She was 8 years older than me, basically raised me after our parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She worked 2 jobs to keep us together to make sure I could stay in school. Julian's voice was steady, but Candace could hear the old grief underneath. When I was 20 she got sick. Cancer. Treatable cancer actually if she'd gotten help early enough. But she kept putting it off because she couldn't afford to miss work, couldn't pay for the tests and treatments. By the time she finally went to the doctor, it had spread too far. I'm so sorry, Candace said softly. She died when she was 33. I was finishing business school, completely unaware of how bad things were because she hid it from me. Didn't want me to drop out and give up my future to take care of her like she'd done for me. Julian turned back to face Candace. After she died, I found out she'd been turned away from assistance programs because she made $50 too much to qualify but not enough to actually afford treatment. The system failed her. Pride killed her. And I was too blind to see what was happening until it was too late. So you started the foundation to help people like her. I started it because I couldn't save my sister, but I could maybe save someone else's sister. Someone else's mother. Someone else's daughter. Julian sat back down at his desk. To answer your question about what I get out of this, I get to sleep at night knowing that Rebecca's death meant something. That her struggle wasn't pointless. Every family we help, every life we change, that's her legacy. Candace wiped at her eyes. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. But here's the thing, Mrs. Washington. The foundation is just money. Money is important, obviously. But it's not enough on its own. What made the difference in your case wasn't just the check I wrote. It was your daughter's courage to speak up in that courtroom. It was your willingness to accept help even though it went against every instinct you have. It was Mr. Cole's willingness to examine his own pain and let go of his anger. It was all of you choosing hope over fear. I almost didn't accept your help, Candace admitted. I sat in that conference room and everything in me wanted to say no. To tell you I'd handle it myself. But you didn't say no. Why? Because I looked at Nia, and I realized that my pride wasn't worth her pain. I'd already put her through so much worrying about money, dealing with the possibility of foster care. If someone was offering us a way out, a way to stop struggling just to survive, then I had to take it. For her. That's the wisdom your daughter was talking about in the courtroom, Julian said. Knowing when to accept help isn't weakness. It's courage of a different kind. They talked for another hour. Candace told him more about her plans to finish the PA program, about how having the financial support from the foundation meant she could actually focus on her studies instead of just surviving. Julian told her about other families they'd helped, successes and failures, the ongoing challenge of trying to fix a broken system one person at a time. I don't want to just take from the foundation, Candace said as she was preparing to leave. When I finish my program, when I'm working as a PA and earning better money, I want to give back. Not just money, though I'll donate what I can. But time, expertise, whatever you need. The foundation always needs medical professionals who volunteer their time at our health fairs and outreach events. When you're ready, we'd be honored to have you. As Candace left his office, Julian felt that familiar sense of purpose that had driven him since Rebecca's death. This was why he did it. Not for recognition or tax write-offs or good publicity. For moments like this, when someone broken by circumstances found their way back to wholeness, found their way back to hope. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Foster. Mr. Cole's first PT session tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thought you'd want to know. Julian smiled. He'd be there. The next morning, the physical therapy center at the neurological facility was bright and airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows letting in natural light. Mr. Cole sat in his wheelchair, dressed in athletic clothes, looking both nervous and determined. Dr. Foster stood beside him, along with his primary physical therapist, an energetic woman named Kim. The first sessions are always the hardest, Kim explained. We're going to be asking your body to do things it hasn't done in 5 years. It's going to hurt, it's going to be frustrating, but I promise you it gets better. How long before I can walk? Mr. Cole asked. That depends on how your body responds. Some patients start taking assisted steps within weeks. Others take months. The key is consistency and patience. Candace and Nia arrived just as the session was starting, along with Julian. Mr. Cole looked surprised to see them all. You all came? He asked. Of course we came, Nia said, climbing up onto a chair in the observation area. We want to watch you start walking. Baby, it's not that simple, Candace said gently. Mr. Cole has a lot of work to do first. But Nia's certainty seemed to give Mr. Cole courage. He nodded at Kim. Okay, let's get started. The session was grueling to watch. Kim had Mr. Cole transfer from his wheelchair to a therapy table, then began working his legs through range of motion exercises. She was firm but encouraging, pushing him when he needed pushing, backing off when he hit his limits. Feel that? Kim asked when Mr. Cole's leg muscles suddenly contracted in response to her manipulation. That's your nervous system waking up. That's the connection being rebuilt. It hurts? Mr. Cole gasped. Good pain or bad pain? Good pain. Like stretching a muscle that's been cramped too long. That's what we want to hear. After 45 minutes, Kim let Mr. Cole rest. He was sweating and exhausted, but there was something different in his expression. Something that looked like hope. You did great today, Kim said. We'll do this 3 times a week for the next month, then reassess. I want you doing your exercises at home every day too. No skipping. I won't skip, Mr. Cole promised. As they were leaving the facility, Mr. Cole stopped his wheelchair and looked up at Julian. I need to say something, and I need you to listen without trying to make me feel better about it. Julian nodded. All right. What I did to Mrs. Washington and Nia, trying to evict them while she was still recovering, that was wrong. I let my own pain and fear turn me into someone I'm ashamed of. You helping me now, paying for my surgery and therapy, that's more than I deserve. I know you said it's not about what I deserve, but I need you to know that I know what I did was wrong. I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Cole. I'm not done. I want to make it right. When I'm back on my feet, literally and figuratively, I want to help the foundation. However I can. Property maintenance, handyman work, whatever you need. I used to be a contractor before the accident. Those skills don't go away just because my legs stopped working. I want to use them to help other people the way you've helped me. Julian extended his hand. Then we have a deal, Mr. Cole. And please call me Julian. Mr. Cole shook his hand firmly. Call me Bernard. Nia tugged on Bernard's sleeve. Mr. Bernard, can I come watch your therapy sometimes? I want to see you learn to walk again. Bernard looked at Candace, who nodded. If it's okay with you, we'd be happy to bring her. I'd like that, Bernard said, his voice rough with emotion. I'd like that a lot. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Bernard had physical therapy 3 times a week. On 2 of those days, Candace and Nia would come watch when Candace wasn't working. Julian stopped by whenever he could, bringing coffee for everyone and words of encouragement for Bernard. The progress was slow but steady. By week 3, Bernard could stand with assistance for 30 seconds at a time. By week 5, he took his first supported step, Kim holding him upright while a walker took most of his weight. By week 7, he could move across the therapy room with the walker, his movements shaky but determined. Nia documented everything in her kindergarten journal, drawing pictures of Bernard's progress. Her teacher, Mrs. Palmer, was so touched by the story that she asked if Nia could share it with the class for show and tell. You see, Nia told her classmates, holding up her latest drawing of Bernard taking steps. Mr. Bernard couldn't walk, but we found out his legs still worked. They just needed help remembering how. Dr. Foster did a surgery, and now he's learning to walk again just like I said he would. One of the other children raised their hand. Did you really tell him you could make him walk in a courtroom? I did. And I was right. The simple confidence in her voice made Candace smile when she heard about it later. Nia had always been an observant child, but this experience was teaching her something more valuable, that noticing things and speaking up about them could change lives. At the 3-month mark, Dr. Foster did a comprehensive evaluation of Bernard's progress. The news was better than anyone had dared hope. Bernard, you've exceeded every benchmark we set, Dr. Foster told him, genuine amazement in her voice. The nerve regeneration is remarkable. You're at the point now where I believe you can transition to just using a cane for support. No more walker. A cane? Bernard repeated. You're saying I can walk with just a cane? With continued therapy and work, yes. And honestly, I think we might be looking at independent walking within another few months. No cane at all. Bernard sat in his wheelchair, which he still used for longer distances to conserve energy, and put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook and Candace realized he was crying. "Bernard," she said softly. "I'm sorry," he managed. I never thought. 5 years I've been in this chair. 5 years of doctors telling me this was my life now. And this little girl." He looked at Nia through his tears. "This amazing little girl saw what they all missed. She gave me my life back." Nia walked over to him and patted his arm. "You gave yourself your life back, Mr. Bernard. You did all the hard work. I just noticed your legs wanted to walk. You're the one who's teaching them how." It was such a simple, profound observation that everyone in the room felt its weight. Julian found himself blinking back tears. Candace was already crying. Even Dr. Foster, who prided herself on professional distance, had to turn away for a moment to compose herself. "You're right, young lady," Bernard said, taking Nia's small hand in his larger one. "But you gave me the hope to try. Without that, none of this would have happened." That evening, after they'd all gone their separate ways, Julian sat in his apartment and thought about the interconnected web of compassion that had formed from one child's observation in a courtroom. Bernard was healing. Candace was back in school, progressing toward her PA certification. Nia was learning that kindness and courage could change the world. And himself? Julian realized he'd learned something too. The foundation had helped hundreds of families over the years, but this was different. This wasn't just writing checks and moving on to the next case. This was relationship, community, people caring for each other beyond what obligation required. Maybe that was the real gift Rebecca had left him. Not just the mission to help others, but the understanding that help only truly worked when it built connections rather than just solving problems. His phone rang. It was Dr. Foster. "Julian, I wanted to thank you for connecting me with Bernard's case. Working with him has reminded me why I went into medicine in the first place. It's not just about fixing bodies. It's about restoring hope." "I think we all needed that reminder," Julian said. "Thank you for taking his case so seriously. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. Bernard's progress has been so remarkable that I'm considering writing a case study. With his permission, of course. There are probably thousands of patients like him who were told nothing more could be done, when actually new treatments might help. If we can document his recovery properly, it could change treatment protocols." "That's wonderful. Have you talked to Bernard about it?" "Not yet. I wanted to run it by you first since the foundation is covering the cost. The case study would necessarily mention the foundation's role. Dr. Foster, if this can help other people, then absolutely. Use our name, tell Bernard's story, do whatever will make the biggest impact." After they hung up, Julian stood at his window again, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Bernard was probably doing his nightly exercises, refusing to skip even one day. Candace was likely studying her PA program materials while Nia slept in the next room. And tomorrow they'd all continue the work of healing, of growing, of becoming the people they were meant to be. This is what the foundation was really about, Julian realized. Not just emergency intervention but long-term transformation. Not just solving crises but building community. Not just giving people what they needed to survive, but giving them what they needed to truly live. Rebecca would have loved this story. She would have loved Nia's courage, Candace's determination, Bernard's persistence. She would have loved seeing how one child's compassion had rippled out to change so many lives. "I hope I'm making you proud, Becca," Julian said quietly to the empty room. "I hope you can see what your sacrifice created." The city lights twinkled back at him, full of stories and struggles and small moments of grace. And somewhere in those lights, a 5-year-old girl slept peacefully, completely unaware that her simple act of kindness in a courtroom would be written up in medical journals, would change treatment protocols, would give hope to thousands of people she'd never meet. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest observations. Sometimes healing didn't just happen to one person but spread through communities like ripples in water. And sometimes, just sometimes, hope was more powerful than any medicine. Dr. Foster's case study on Bernard Cole's recovery began to circulate through medical journals and conferences within 6 weeks of being published. The response was overwhelming. Neurologists, orthopedic surgeons, and physical therapists from around the country reached out, asking for details about the treatment protocol, the specific surgical techniques used, the physical therapy regimen that had achieved such remarkable results. But what really caught people's attention wasn't just the medical side. It was the story behind it. The 5-year-old girl who had noticed what experienced doctors had missed. The landlord and tenant who had gone from courtroom adversaries to friends. The billionaire philanthropist who had brought them all together. The medical system that had failed and then, when given a second chance, had succeeded brilliantly. "I've been getting calls from patients around the country," Dr. Foster told Bernard during one of his regular checkups. People who were told they'd never walk again, asking if they might be candidates for similar treatment. Bernard was standing now without any support, though he kept a cane nearby for longer distances. 4 months post-surgery, his progress continued to exceed everyone's expectations except, perhaps, Nia's. "That's amazing," Bernard said. "Are you going to treat them?" "I can't treat everyone who calls, but I'm working with the medical community to develop better screening protocols. To help identify patients who might benefit from interventions they were told weren't possible. Your case is literally changing how we approach spinal injuries. Because a kindergartner pointed out something obvious that everyone else missed. Because a kindergartner was observant and compassionate enough to speak up," Dr. Foster corrected. "And because you were brave enough to hope again. That's equally important." Bernard had dropped his eviction case against Candace months ago, but their relationship had evolved far beyond landlord and tenant. He'd reduced her rent by $200 a month, which she'd initially protested until he pointed out that he wanted to do it and she'd do better to just accept the help graciously. "You're starting to sound like Julian," Candace had laughed. "Julian has the right idea about a lot of things," Bernard had replied. Now Bernard spent his days split between physical therapy, managing his properties and volunteering with the Mitchell Foundation. Julian had been serious about wanting Bernard's help, and Bernard had been serious about giving it. He did property maintenance on the Foundation's community center, helped evaluate housing situations for families they were assisting, used his contracting expertise to keep costs down on renovation projects. "I spent 5 years feeling useless," Bernard told Julian one afternoon while they were inspecting a roof at one of the Foundation's properties. "Even though I was running my rental properties, I felt like I wasn't contributing anything real. This helping families the way you help me, this feels real." "You're good at it," Julian said. "You understand what people are going through because you've been there. That empathy makes you more effective than someone who's just doing a job." The relationship between Bernard and the Washington family deepened as well. He'd become something like an uncle to Nia, stopping by their apartment once a week for dinner. Candace would cook, and they'd all sit around the small kitchen table, talking about their days, Bernard's progress, Nia's adventures in kindergarten. "Guess what we learned in school today?" Nia said one evening, bouncing in her chair. "We learned about the heart. Mrs. Palmer said the heart pumps blood all through your body, and if it stops working you get very sick." "That's right," Candace confirmed. "The heart is one of the most important organs in your body. Mrs. Palmer said my mama is a nurse and knows all about hearts and stuff. She asked if you could come talk to the class sometime, Mama." "Can you?" Candace looked pleased. "I'd love to. I'll talk to Mrs. Palmer and see when would be good." Bernard watched this exchange with a wistfulness that Candace had started to recognize. He'd mentioned once, carefully, that he'd wanted children but his wife had left after his accident before they'd gotten around to starting a family. These dinners with them filled something in him that had been empty for a long time. "You know," Bernard said carefully, "if you ever need help with Nia, picking her up from school or anything, I'm available. I don't have much going on most days besides therapy and foundation work." "Bernard, that's incredibly kind, but you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Nia's a special kid. Spending time with her, with both of you, it's been healing in ways that have nothing to do with my legs." Candace reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Then yes, we'd appreciate the help. And your company." A few weeks later, Candace did go speak to Nia's kindergarten class. She brought in a stethoscope and let each child listen to their own heartbeat. She showed them pictures of organs and explained in simple terms what each one did. And she told them, with Nia beaming proudly from her seat, about how important it was to notice things, to ask questions, to be curious about the world. "My daughter noticed something about our friend Mr. Bernard that helped him get better," Candace explained. "She was paying attention. She was curious. And she wasn't afraid to speak up. All of you can do that too. You can notice things and help people just by paying attention and caring." Mrs. Palmer was so impressed that she invited Candace back the following month. Word spread to other teachers, and soon Candace was giving similar talks to several classes at Nia's school. It was informal medical education, but it was also teaching these children something more important. That they had agency, that their observations mattered, that compassion combined with curiosity could change lives. Julian heard about these school visits and had an idea. He called Candace one evening. "How would you feel about expanding what you're doing at Nia's school? The foundation could sponsor a program where you go to schools around the city, teaching kids basic health and medical awareness. We'd pay you for your time, cover all expenses. It would be in addition to your nursing work, not replacing it." Julian, that's incredible. But I'm already stretched thin with work and my PA classes. Which is why we'd structure it flexibly. Once a month to start, maybe more when you finish your program. Think about it. You're already doing it anyway at Nia's school. Why not reach more kids? Candace did think about it. She talked it over with Lauren, with Bernard, with Mrs. Henderson. Everyone agreed it was a wonderful opportunity. A week later she called Julian back and accepted. The program launched 2 months later. Candace visited 6 schools that first month, teaching children about the human body, health, and the power of observation. At every school she told the story of Nia and Bernard, carefully anonymized but still powerful. A child I know noticed something about an adult that doctors had missed, she would say. Not because the doctors were bad at their jobs, but because this child was looking at the situation differently. With fresh eyes and a caring heart. That's what I want all of you to learn. That you can make a difference. That your observations matter. That kindness and curiosity together are powerful tools. The feedback from schools was overwhelmingly positive. Teachers reported that their students were more engaged, asking more questions, showing more compassion toward each other. Parents thanked Candace for inspiring their children to care about others. Meanwhile, Bernard's recovery continued. At the 6-month mark, he walked unaided across Dr. Foster's office. No cane, no walker, just his own 2 legs carrying him forward with only a slight limp. How does it feel? Dr. Foster asked, grinning. Like being reborn, Bernard said simply. Like getting a second chance at life. You still need to be careful. Continue your exercises, don't overdo it. But Bernard, you've achieved what most people would consider impossible. I had help, Bernard said. A lot of help from a lot of people who cared. He was thinking about Nia, about Candace, about Julian, about Dr. Foster and Kim the physical therapist and all the others who had been part of his journey. But mostly he was thinking about that moment in the courtroom when a 5-year-old girl had looked at him and seen not an obstacle or an enemy, but a person in pain who might be helped. That evening Bernard actually walked to the Washingtons' apartment for dinner. It was only 3 blocks and he took it slow, but he did it entirely on his own. When Candace opened the door and saw him standing there without his wheelchair or even a cane, she started crying. Bernard, you walked here. I did. I really did. Nia came running and wrapped her arms around Bernard's waist. I told you your legs remembered the way. I told you. They had a celebration dinner that night. Bernard had brought flowers, his first gift to Candace since everything had changed between them. They weren't romantic flowers, just a gesture of gratitude and friendship, but they meant everything. Over chicken that Candace had made and vegetables that Bernard had brought from the farmer's market he could now walk to, they talked about how far they'd all come. I start my clinical rotations for the PA program next month, Candace said. It's the last phase before graduation. I'm nervous but excited. You're going to be incredible at it, Bernard said. You already are. I've watched you with Nia explaining medical concepts to her. You have a gift for making complicated things understandable. That's what Mr. Julian says too, Nia piped up. He says Mama should write a book about medicine for kids someday. Maybe I will, baby. Someday when I have time. Speaking of Julian, Bernard said. He asked me if I'd be interested in joining the foundation's board of directors. An advisory position he called it. Said they need someone who understands what it's like to be on the receiving end of help. That's wonderful, Bernard. Will you do it? I think so. Feels right, you know? Using what I've been through to help shape how the foundation helps others. As the evening wound down and Nia started getting sleepy, Bernard stood to leave. At the door he paused. I want to say something and I need you both to hear it. Before the accident, before the courtroom, before all of this, I was becoming someone I didn't like. Someone hard and bitter. You two, this whole experience, you've given me back more than just my ability to walk. You've given me back my humanity. My ability to hope. My ability to care about something beyond my own survival. You did that yourself, Bernard, Candace said softly. You chose hope. You chose to believe that things could get better. We just walked alongside you while you did it. Then thank you for walking with me. Both of you. After Bernard left, walking steadily down the stairs and out into the evening, Candace tucked Nia into bed. Mama, are we rich now? Nia asked sleepily. No, baby. Why do you ask? Because we have lots of friends. Mrs. Henderson and Miss Lauren and Mr. Bernard and Mr. Julian and Dr. Foster. That's lots of riches, right? Candace felt tears prick her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. That's the best kind of riches. The kind that really matters. As Nia drifted off to sleep, Candace sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about how true her daughter's words were. 6 months ago she'd been alone and desperate, facing eviction and the possible loss of her daughter. Now she had a community, people who cared, opportunities she'd never dreamed possible. And it had all started with Nia's courage to speak up, to see beyond the immediate conflict to the person underneath, to offer hope when hope seemed foolish. Sometimes the best treatment plans weren't written by doctors. Sometimes they were spoken by children who still believed that caring about each other was the most natural thing in the world. Sometimes healing happened not just in operating rooms and physical therapy centers, but in courtrooms and kitchens and everywhere that people chose kindness over fear. Candace kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Thank you, baby, for seeing Mr. Bernard's pain, for speaking up, for teaching me that accepting help isn't weakness. You're the wisest person I know." In the morning, life would continue its forward march. Candace would go to work, Nia to school, Bernard to his therapy and foundation work. But they would all carry with them the knowledge that they'd been part of something remarkable, something that had transformed all their lives in ways both big and small. And somewhere, in medical journals and at conferences and in conversations between doctors, the story continued to spread. The story of a 5-year-old's observation that had changed one man's life and, through his case study, was changing how medicine approached thousands of other cases. Hope, it turned out, was contagious. And sometimes that was the best medicine of all. The next 3 months brought a rhythm of normalcy that none of them had experienced in a long time. Candace thrived in her clinical rotations, applying everything she'd learned to real patients under the supervision of experienced physician assistants. Her supervising PA, a kind woman named Dr. Susan Wright, pulled her aside one day. "Candace, you're one of the best students I've worked with in years. You have excellent clinical judgment, but more than that, you have genuine compassion. Patients trust you. That's something you can't teach." The words meant more to Candace than any grade could. This was what she'd been working toward, what she'd sacrificed for, what she'd nearly lost hope of achieving. And now it was within reach. Bernard continued his recovery and his work with the Mitchell Foundation. His physical therapy had tapered to once a week, maintenance rather than intensive training. He walked now with barely a limp, and on good days you couldn't tell he'd ever been in a wheelchair at all. He'd sold his second rental property, the one he'd been struggling to maintain, and used the money to make improvements on the building where Candace lived. New roof, updated plumbing, fresh paint in the common areas. "You don't have to do all this," one of the other tenants told him. "I know I don't have to," Bernard replied, echoing words he'd once said to Candace. "I want to. This building, these apartments, they're people's homes. They deserve to be maintained properly." Nia finished kindergarten at the top of her class, not because she was academically ahead of other children, but because her curiosity and compassion had made her a leader among her peers. Mrs. Palmer wrote in her final report, "Nia Washington is a remarkable child who demonstrates extraordinary empathy and observational skills. She will do great things in this world." The report made Candace cry happy tears. Her daughter would have opportunities she'd never had. Nia would grow up knowing that education mattered, that compassion mattered, that speaking up could change lives. Julian's foundation continued to grow, helped in no small part by the publicity from Bernard's case. Donations increased. The board expanded to include Bernard, as he'd agreed. They helped 12 more families that quarter, providing everything from medical assistance to housing support to educational grants. "I've been thinking," Julian said during one board meeting. "We've been reactive so far, responding to applications as they come in. What if we became more proactive? What if we identified at-risk families before they reached crisis points?" "How would we do that?" one of the other board members asked. "Partner with hospitals, schools, social services. Create a network where people can be referred to us early, when a little help can prevent a catastrophe rather than just cleaning up after one." Bernard nodded enthusiastically. "I've been in both positions. Getting help after you've already lost everything and getting help before things fall apart. The second way is so much better. It preserves dignity, prevents trauma." The board approved Julian's proposal unanimously. Within months, the foundation had partnerships with 4 hospitals and 8 schools, creating an early warning system for families in need. One evening, Bernard invited Candace, Nia, and Julian to his house for dinner. It was the first time any of them had been inside since Candace's desperate visit months ago. The house looked different now. Brighter, warmer. Bernard had painted, bought new furniture, turned the space into a real home rather than just a place where a man in a wheelchair tried to survive. "This is beautiful, Bernard," Candace said, looking around. "I figured it was time to stop just existing and start living again. You all taught me that." They ate the meal Bernard had prepared, Simple but good, grilled chicken with rice and vegetables. Over dinner, Julian shared news about the foundation's growth. Bernard talked about a family he'd helped that week, a single father with 2 kids facing eviction. Candace described a particularly challenging case from her clinical rotation where she'd correctly diagnosed a condition that the supervising doctor had initially missed. "You're carrying on the tradition," Julian said with a smile. "Observant, caring medical professionals who notice what others miss. Just like Nia in that courtroom." Nia beamed at the praise. "When I grow up, I want to help people too. Maybe be a doctor like Dr. Foster. Or a nurse like Mama. Or someone who gives money to people who need help like Mr. Julian." "You can be all of those things in different ways," Bernard said. "The important part is the helping, not the specific job." After dinner, they sat in Bernard's living room, and somehow the conversation turned to that day in the courtroom. It felt like both a lifetime ago and just yesterday. "I was so scared that day," Candace admitted. "I thought I was going to lose everything. Lose Nia." "I was angry," Bernard said. "I'd built up this wall around myself, convinced that I had to protect what was mine because no one else would. I saw you as a problem to solve, not a person in pain." "I almost didn't go to that courtroom," Julian revealed. "I had another meeting scheduled. I only ended up there because my assistant mixed up my calendar. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked into courtroom 4B that day." "God works in mysterious ways," Candace said softly. "Or fate, or whatever you want to call it. We were all supposed to be in that room that day. We were supposed to meet, supposed to help each other." "I don't know about fate," Julian said. "But I do know that Nia's courage gave us all permission to hope again. That's real. That's measurable. And that's changed everything." They were quiet for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts about how far they'd come, how different their lives looked now. "Mama," Nia said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Can I tell them about my project?" "Of course, baby." Nia explained that for first grade, which would start in the fall, her teacher had asked students to think about a project they'd like to do over the year. "I want to make a book about helping people. With pictures and stories. And I want the first story to be about Mr. Bernard learning to walk again." Bernard's eyes filled with tears. "You want to tell my story? If that's okay. I want other kids to know that if you care about people and pay attention, you can help them. Even if you're just a kid." "I think that's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever wanted to do for me," Bernard said, his voice thick with emotion. As the evening wound down, Julian stood at Bernard's window, looking out at the neighborhood. This was what the foundation was really accomplishing, he thought. Not just solving immediate crises but creating connections. Building community. Showing people that they didn't have to face their struggles alone. Before they left, Bernard pulled Candace aside. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Your lease is up in 2 months." Candace felt a flutter of old panic before she reminded herself that everything was different now. "Yes, I know. I want you to stay, obviously. But I also want to offer you a different arrangement. What if, instead of renting, you worked toward owning the unit? I could set it up as a rent-to-own situation. Every payment you make would build equity. In 10 years it would be yours." "Bernard, that's too generous." "It's fair. You've been a good tenant when you could be, and when you couldn't, it wasn't your fault. More than that, you and Nia have given me more than I can ever repay. This is me trying to do something meaningful for you in return. We didn't help you to get something back. I know that. Which is exactly why I want to do this. Please, Candace. Let me help you build something permanent for yourself and Nia." Candace hugged him tightly. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Driving home, Nia fell asleep in the back seat. Candace glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror, this amazing little person who had changed so many lives just by caring enough to speak up. "We're going to be okay," Candace whispered to her sleeping daughter. "More than okay. We're going to be great." That night, Candace updated her journal, something she'd started doing at her therapist's suggestion months ago. She wrote about the dinner, about Bernard's offer, about how strange and wonderful it was to have gone from desperation to security, from isolation to community, from fear to hope. She wrote, 6 months ago I thought my life was over. I thought I'd failed Nia, failed myself, failed everyone. I was so focused on surviving alone that I couldn't see the hands reaching out to help me. Nia saw what I couldn't. She saw that we're not meant to survive alone. We're meant to help each other, to care for each other, to walk together through the hard times. I'm learning that accepting help isn't weakness. It's trust. It's faith. It's love." Across town, Bernard was writing too. In a notebook Dr. Foster had suggested he keep to track his emotional recovery alongside his physical one. He wrote, Today I cook dinner for people I care about in a house that feels like home again. I walked without thinking about it, without counting steps or worrying about falling. For the first time in 5 years I felt like myself. Not the man I was before the accident, but someone new. Someone better, maybe. Someone who knows how to accept help and give it. Someone who understands that connection is more valuable than independence. And Julian, in his apartment overlooking the city, sent an email to the foundation's board. Today reminded me why we do this work. It's not just about money or programs or systems. It's about giving people the space to heal, the support to grow, and the hope to believe that better days are coming. Bernard, Candace, and Nia have taught us all that kindness is contagious, that courage comes in all sizes, and that sometimes the best help we can offer is simply walking alongside someone while they find their way forward. 3 different people, 3 different perspectives, all writing about the same truth, that healing happens in community, that hope grows when it's shared, and that love, real selfless love for fellow humans, is the most powerful medicine in the world. The city hummed with its endless energy, full of struggle and joy, pain and healing, endings and beginnings. And somewhere in that city, a little girl slept peacefully, dreaming of the book she would write, completely unaware that her story was already being written in the changed lives all around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to choose kindness over fear. But tonight, everyone rested in the knowledge that they were part of something beautiful, something that had started with one child's observation and had grown into a network of care and compassion that would continue spreading long after they were all gone. This was legacy. This was meaning. This was hope. And it was just the beginning. 3 months passed in a blur of activity and growth. Candace completed her PA program with honors, passing her certification exam on the first try. The celebration at her graduation was attended by Lauren, Mrs. Henderson, Bernard, Julian, Dr. Foster, and of course, Nia, who wore a bright red dress for the occasion and carried a bouquet of flowers almost as big as she was. "I'm so proud of you, Mama," Nia whispered during the ceremony. "You worked so hard. We worked hard, baby. This is for both of us." Candace had already accepted a position at Community General Hospital, the same place where she'd worked as a nurse. But now she'd be working in the cardiac unit as a physician assistant, earning nearly double her nursing salary. The financial stress that had defined her life for so long was finally, truly gone. Bernard had taken his role with the Mitchell Foundation seriously, helping to design programs for transitional housing and financial literacy. His contractor skills proved invaluable in evaluating properties and managing renovation projects. But more than that, his personal story resonated with the families they served. He understood their fear, their shame, their reluctance to accept help. He could speak to them in a way that others couldn't. One afternoon, Bernard was meeting with a young couple facing eviction when the husband said, "This is embarrassing. I should be able to take care of my family myself." Bernard smiled gently. "I know that feeling. I held on to it for 5 years while I sat in a wheelchair, convinced that accepting help meant admitting defeat. You know what I learned? Pride doesn't pay the rent. It doesn't feed your kids. But accepting help, working with people who care, that's what lets you get back on your feet so you can eventually help someone else. There's no shame in it. The only shame would be in letting your family suffer because your ego won't let you reach out." The couple accepted the foundation's help. 3 months later, the husband would have a stable job, and they'd be caught up on their bills and working toward financial stability. Dr. Foster's research paper on Bernard's case had been published in multiple medical journals and presented at 2 national conferences. She'd been contacted by 17 patients who believed they might be candidates for similar treatment. She couldn't take them all, but she'd helped develop screening criteria that other doctors were using across the country. "Bernard, you've probably helped hundreds of people you'll never meet," Dr. Foster told him during one of his final checkups. "Your case has changed medical practice. That's extraordinary." "A 5-year-old girl changed medical practice," Bernard corrected. "I just had the problem she solved." As the anniversary of that courtroom hearing approached, Judge Patricia Harrison reached out to Julian. "I'd like all of you to come back to court on June 15th, just like I requested. I want to officially close the case and hear how everyone is doing. Would you be willing?" Everyone agreed immediately. The date was set. On the morning of June 15th, nearly 9 months after that first hearing, they all gathered at the courthouse again. But this time, everything was different. Candace wore professional clothes for her new job as a PA, her posture confident and healthy. Nia had grown taller, wore her hair in neat braids, and carried herself with the quiet confidence of a child who knew she was loved and valued. And Bernard walked into that courthouse on his own 2 feet, no wheelchair, no cane, nothing but his own strength carrying him forward. They met in the lobby first, this group of people who had been strangers a year ago and were now something like family. Mrs. Pierce was there too, having heard about the follow-up hearing. She hugged Candace warmly. "I've been following your story," Mrs. Pierce said. "What all of you have accomplished together, it's remarkable. I wish every case I worked on ended this well." "Maybe more of them can," Candace suggested. "If more people like Julian are willing to help and more people like me are willing to accept that help." They were ushered into courtroom 4B, the same room where everything had changed. Several people were already in the gallery. Lauren from the hospital, Mrs. Henderson, Kim the physical therapist, some board members from the Mitchell Foundation. Judge Harrison had apparently invited everyone who had played a role in this story. When Judge Harrison entered and everyone rose, Candace felt a wave of emotion. This courtroom had been the site of her greatest fear, and now it was becoming the site of a celebration. "Please be seated," Judge Harrison said, smiling in a way judges rarely do. "This is highly irregular, bringing everyone back for what is essentially a follow-up on a dismissed case. But when I sent you all away 9 months ago, I did so with a request. I wanted to know how this story ended. So I'm asking, how did it end?" Julian stood first. "Your Honor, if I may? Please. When I walked into this courtroom 9 months ago, I was simply killing time before another appointment. I had no idea I was about to witness something that would restore my faith in human compassion. Nia Washington, at 5 years old, demonstrated more courage and insight than most adults ever manage. She saw past the immediate conflict to the person in need. She spoke up when speaking up might have cost her family their case. And she changed all our lives in the process." Julian turned to look at Bernard. "Mr. Cole, would you like to address the court?" Bernard stood slowly, not from pain or difficulty, but from the weight of emotion. He walked to the front of the courtroom, his steps steady and sure, and turned to face everyone. "Your Honor, 9 months ago I sat in a wheelchair in this room. I'd been in that chair for 5 years. I'd given up hope. I'd become bitter and hard. I was here trying to evict a single mother and her daughter because I was so focused on my own survival that I couldn't see their suffering." He paused, looking at Candace and Nia. "Then this little girl looked at me and said something impossible. She said she could make me walk." Everyone laughed. Even I almost laughed. But Judge Harrison didn't laugh. She took Nia seriously. And that changed everything. Bernard turned fully to face Nia. "Nia, you were right. Your mama's medical videos taught you well. You saw what experienced doctors had missed. But more than that, you cared enough to speak up even when it might not have helped your case. You showed compassion to someone who wasn't showing you any. That taught me something more valuable than walking." "What did it teach you, Mr. Bernard?" Nia asked, her clear voice carrying through the courtroom. "It taught me that we're all in this together. That my pain doesn't excuse hurting others. That accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That giving help isn't charity, it's community." Bernard's voice cracked slightly. "You gave me back my life, sweetheart. Not just my ability to walk but my ability to hope, to care, to be part of something bigger than myself." There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even Judge Harrison was wiping at her eyes with a tissue. "Mrs. Washington," the judge said. "Would you like to speak?" Candace stood, holding Nia's hand. "Your Honor, 9 months ago I stood in this courtroom believing my life was over. I'd already lost so much to that accident. I thought I was about to lose my daughter too, at least temporarily. I was ready to fight, to argue, to do whatever I had to do. But I never expected grace." She looked at Julian. "Mr. Mitchell offered help with no strings attached. No judgment, no requirements beyond letting him help. I almost said no because I was so used to fighting alone." Then she looked at Bernard. "And Mr. Cole, who had every right to be angry with me, instead became one of my dearest friends. He's been there for Nia and me in ways I can't even describe. He's become family." Candace's voice strengthened. "What I learned through all of this is that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need help. Sometimes courage looks like accepting a hand that's reaching out to you. And sometimes the people you think are your enemies are just people in pain, waiting for someone to see them the way Nia saw Mr. Cole." Judge Harrison nodded slowly. "Nia, would you like to say anything?" Nia stood up in the gallery. "Can I go down there?" "Of course." Nia walked to the front of the courtroom, her red dress bright against the somber wood paneling. She looked tiny standing before the judge's bench, but she didn't seem intimidated. "I just wanted to say that I'm glad Mr. Bernard can walk now. And I'm glad my mama finished school and isn't sad anymore. And I'm glad Mr. Julian helped us and that Dr. Foster knew how to fix Mr. Bernard's back. But mostly I'm glad that everyone stopped being scared. Scared of what, Nia? Judge Harrison asked gently. Scared of asking for help. Scared of giving help. Scared of caring about each other. My mama always tells me that love is stronger than fear. I think that's what happened here. Everyone chose love instead of fear. The simplicity and truth of it silenced the courtroom. This child, now 6 years old, had distilled the entire experience down to its essential truth. Love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. Judge Harrison stood up, something she almost never did outside of entering or leaving the courtroom. I've been a judge for 23 years. I've presided over thousands of cases. Most of them end with winners and losers, with one party happy and another disappointed. This is the first case I've ever seen where everyone won. Where a crisis became an opportunity for transformation. She looked at each of them in turn. Mr. Mitchell, your foundation does extraordinary work. Mr. Cole, your recovery is nothing short of miraculous, and your commitment to helping others honors what you've been given. Mrs. Washington, your determination and eventual willingness to accept help has given your daughter a wonderful example of both strength and wisdom. Then Judge Harrison focused on Nia. And you, young lady. You are perhaps the wisest person in this courtroom. You saw what others missed. You spoke up when others stayed silent. You offered hope when others offered only conflict. Never lose that insight, that compassion. The world needs more people like you. Thank you, Judge Ma'am, Nia said politely. Judge Harrison smiled. For the record, and for the benefit of anyone who might someday read the transcript of these proceedings, let it be known that on this day, June 15, case number 2024 EV 3847, Bernard Cole versus Candace Washington, is officially closed with extreme prejudice. The court finds that all parties have not only resolved their differences but have created something beautiful from what began as a conflict. May we all learn from their example. She brought down her gavel one final time. This court is adjourned. As everyone started to move and talk, creating a buzz of warm conversation, Bernard approached Nia. He knelt down so he was at her eye level. Nia, I need to show you something. Something I've been practicing for this day. Everyone quieted, watching. Bernard stood back up and walked to the far end of the courtroom. Then, with everyone watching, he walked back across the courtroom. Not just walked. He walked confidently, smoothly, with barely any trace of his old limp. He walked the way he must have walked before his accident, before 5 years in a wheelchair, before pain and bitterness had changed him. When he reached the front of the courtroom again, he knelt once more before Nia. You were right. You said you'd make me walk and you did. So I wanted to show you just how well I can walk now. Thank you, Nia. For seeing me. For caring. For giving me hope when I'd forgotten what hope felt like. Nia threw her arms around Bernard's neck, and he hugged her back, both of them crying happy tears while everyone else in the courtroom applauded and cried along with them. It was a moment that would be remembered by everyone present. A moment of pure human connection, of transformation completed, of hope fulfilled. A moment that proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the justice system does more than adjudicate disputes. Sometimes it bears witness to grace. After the formal hearing concluded, they all gathered in the hallway outside the courtroom. Photos were taken, contact information exchanged with people who hadn't met before today. Lauren and Mrs. Henderson fussed over Candace's PA credentials. Kim, the physical therapist, took more photos of Bernard walking. Dr. Foster talked with Judge Harrison about the medical aspects of the case. Julian stood slightly apart, watching it all with satisfaction. This was why he did this work. Not for moments like this, exactly, though they were wonderful when they happened. But for the lives changed, the hope restored, the community built. His sister Rebecca would have loved this. She would have loved Nia's courage, Candace's grace, Bernard's transformation. Thank you, Candace said, coming to stand beside him. For everything. For seeing my application and deciding to help. For bringing us all together. For showing us that accepting help isn't defeat, it's wisdom. You all did the hard part, Julian said. I just provided resources. You provided the courage, the determination, the compassion. That's the real story here. As they all prepared to leave the courthouse, heading out for a celebratory lunch that Julian had insisted on hosting, Nia tugged on Judge Harrison's robe. Judge, ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course, Nia. Why did you stand up that day? In court, when everyone was laughing at what I said about Mr. Bernard walking. You stood up and made them stop. Why? Judge Harrison knelt down, something she'd done twice in one day, a record for her. Because I recognized something important, Nia. I recognized that you weren't making a silly comment or trying to get attention. You were making an observation born from genuine caring and actual knowledge. And I've learned, in all my years as a judge, that dismissing someone's concern just because they're young or different or unexpected, that's how we miss important truths. So you believed me? I believed you cared. And I believed that care deserved to be heard. Turns out, you were right about more than just Mr. Bernard's legs. You were right about what happens when people stop fighting and start helping each other. Nia hugged the judge, a spontaneous gesture of gratitude that made Judge Harrison tear up again. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for speaking up, sweetheart. Thank you for reminding all of us what really matters. As they all finally left the courthouse, walking out into bright afternoon sunshine, Candace held Nia's hand and looked back at the building. So much had changed within those walls. So much pain had been transformed into healing, so much fear into hope. Mama, what are you thinking about? Nia asked. I'm thinking about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can become the best moments if we let them. I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you're my daughter and that you taught me so much about courage. I wasn't being courageous, Mama. I was just trying to help. That's exactly what courage is, baby. Trying to help even when you're not sure it will work. Speaking up even when you're scared. Caring about someone even when they haven't been kind to you. You're the bravest person I know. They walked to Julian's car, where Bernard was already helping load everyone up for the trip to the restaurant. He moved easily now, no hesitation, no visible pain. 9 months ago he'd been wheeled into that courthouse. Today he'd walked in and walked out on his own 2 feet. It was a small thing and a huge thing simultaneously. A medical success story, certainly. But more than that, it was a human success story. A story of people choosing to believe in each other, to care for each other, to walk together through hard times. And as they drove away from the courthouse, heading toward lunch and laughter and continued friendship, none of them yet knew that their story was about to take one more unexpected turn. One more gift was waiting just around the corner, a gift none of them had asked for but all of them deserved. Sometimes the day of reckoning isn't about judgment. Sometimes it's about celebration. Sometimes it's about witnessing transformation and honoring the courage it takes to change. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's about acknowledging that love really is stronger than fear, that hope really can heal, and that a child's wisdom really can change the world. The celebration lunch after the court hearing turned into a celebration of everything. They gathered at a nice restaurant downtown, one that Julian insisted on, with a private dining room where they could talk and laugh without disturbing other patrons. The long table was filled with food, with conversation, with the kind of joy that comes from shared struggle and shared triumph. Nia sat between her mother and Bernard, chattering happily about starting first grade in the fall and the book she wanted to write about helping people. Mrs. Henderson and Lauren traded stories about taking care of Nia during those difficult early months. Dr. Foster and Kim discussed Bernard's case and the implications for other patients. Judge Harrison, who had accepted Julian's invitation to join them, talked with Mrs. Pierce about how they might work together to identify families before crisis points. Julian stood and raised his glass of water. I'd like to propose a toast. To Nia, whose courage changed all our lives. To Candace, whose determination and grace under pressure inspired us all. To Bernard, whose recovery exceeded every expectation. To everyone here who played a part in this story. And to the power of choosing hope over fear, community over isolation, love over indifference. Hear, hear, everyone chorused, raising their own glasses. As they drank and the noise of celebration resumed, Bernard stood up and cleared his throat. Actually, I have something I need to say. Something I've been planning. The table quieted, everyone turning to look at him. 9 months ago, I was a bitter man in a wheelchair trying to evict a struggling family. Today, I'm standing here without any assistance because of that family's compassion. But here's the thing. Walking again was wonderful, but it wasn't the biggest gift I received. He looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. The biggest gift was community. Finding people who cared. Learning that I didn't have to face life alone. So I've made some decisions about my future, and I wanted to share them with all of you first. Bernard pulled out some papers from his jacket pocket. I'm selling my remaining rental property and using the money to establish a fund through the Mitchell Foundation. The Bernard Cole Second Chances Fund. It will specifically help people with disabilities who need medical treatment they can't afford, and single parents facing housing insecurity. The 2 groups whose suffering I understand best. Candace gasped. Bernard, that's your retirement security. Actually, I've been offered a full-time position with the Mitchell Foundation, which Julian somehow forgot to mention he was planning to offer. Bernard shot Julian a look that was half reproach, half affection. I'll be the Director of Outreach and Support Services. Steady income, health insurance, and the chance to help people every day. I don't need the rental property anymore. I need purpose. This gives me both. The table erupted in applause. Julian stood and shook Bernard's hand warmly. I was going to announce the job offer as a surprise, but you beat me to it. Welcome aboard officially. There's more, Bernard continued, waiting for the noise to die down. Candace, Nia, I know I offered you the rent-to-own arrangement on your apartment. That offer stands, but I want to modify it. I'm going to cover the first year's worth of payments myself. Consider it a gift, my way of saying thank you for changing my life. Bernard, absolutely not, Candace protested. You've already done so much. Please, let me do this. I have more than I need. You and Nia showed me that having enough isn't about dollar amounts. It's about having people who matter. You matter to me. Your family. Let me help family. Candace looked at Nia, then at Bernard, then around the table at all these people who had become their community. She thought about the woman she'd been 9 months ago, so determined to handle everything alone, so afraid to accept help. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood that accepting love and support didn't make you weak. It made you strong. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you, Bernard. From both of us, thank you. Nia hugged Bernard tightly. You're the best Mr. Bernard in the whole world. I'm the luckiest Mr. Bernard in the whole world, he corrected. Dr. Foster stood next. Since we're apparently doing announcements, I have one too. I've been working with several colleagues on developing a comprehensive screening protocol for patients like Bernard, people who were told nothing more could be done. We're launching a pilot program at 3 hospitals and we're calling it the Nia Protocol. Nia's eyes went wide. Me? You. Because you're the one who showed us that sometimes the most important observations come from people who see things differently. The protocol will train healthcare workers to look at patients the way you looked at Mr. Bernard, with fresh eyes, with compassion, with the understanding that what we think we know isn't always complete. Judge Harrison spoke up. I have something to add as well. I've been talking with several colleagues about creating a compassion court, a specialized docket that handles housing and medical disputes with the explicit goal of finding restorative solutions rather than just legal ones. Cases like yours, where early intervention and creative problem-solving can prevent catastrophe. I'm hoping Mr. Mitchell's foundation might partner with us on this initiative. Absolutely, Julian said immediately. That's exactly the kind of systemic change we've been hoping to create. As the lunch continued, the conversation flowed between serious planning for these new initiatives and lighter moments of laughter and storytelling. They shared memories of the past 9 months, marveling at how far they'd all come. At one point, Nia leaned over to her mother and whispered, Mama, is this what happy endings feel like? Candace felt tears spring to her eyes. Yes, baby. This is exactly what happy endings feel like. But it wasn't really an ending, Candace realized. It was a beginning. A beginning of new careers, new initiatives, new ways of helping people. A beginning of deeper friendships and lasting connections. A beginning of living with purpose rather than just surviving. After lunch, as people started to say their goodbyes, Julian pulled Candace aside. There's one more thing. The foundation is establishing a scholarship program for children of families we've helped. Full ride through college as long as they maintain decent grades and contribute to their community. Nia will be the first recipient. When she's ready for college, everything will be paid for. Candace stared at him, overwhelmed. Julian, I can't, that's too much. It's not too much. It's what Rebecca would have wanted. To invest in a child's future so they never have to choose between education and survival the way she did. Please, Candace. Let me do this for Nia. She changed my life too. She reminded me why the foundation exists. Then yes. Yes and thank you. I don't have words for how much all of this means. You don't need words. Just keep being the incredible mother and now PA that you are. Keep raising Nia to be the compassionate, observant person she already is. That's all the thanks any of us need. As they rejoined the group, Candace watched Nia showing Mrs. Henderson a drawing she'd made, watched Bernard laughing with Lauren about something, watched Dr. Foster and Judge Harrison exchanging business cards and ideas. This was community. This was what happened when people chose to care for each other. The party began to break up, people heading back to their lives. But before Bernard left, he stopped Nia one more time. Nia, I want you to have something. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple necklace with a small silver charm in the shape of a butterfly. Butterflies are symbols of transformation. They remind us that sometimes the most beautiful things come from difficult circumstances. I want you to have this to remember that you can transform lives just by caring about people. You transformed mine. Nia carefully took the necklace, examining the butterfly charm with wonder. It's beautiful, Mr. Bernard. I'll keep it forever. And I'll keep walking forward forever thanks to you. As Candace and Nia finally headed home, taking the bus because Candace still hadn't replaced her car and found she didn't really need to with the bus routes being so convenient, they talked about everything that had happened. It was a good day, wasn't it, Mama? Nia said. The best day, baby. One of the best days of my whole life. Better than when I was born? Candace laughed. Different from when you were born. That day you came into my life. Today we celebrated how you've changed so many other lives too. That evening, after Nia was asleep, Candace stood at her window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in those lights, Bernard was probably settling into his house, still marveling at the ability to walk from room to room. Julian was likely working late at his office, planning new ways to help families. Dr. Foster was perhaps reviewing medical files, looking for more patients who might be helped by the Nia protocol. And she, Candace Washington, former nurse and current physician assistant, was standing in an apartment she was buying with a daughter who was secure and loved and growing up to be remarkable, with a community of people who cared about them, with a future that looked brighter than she'd ever dared to imagine. Her phone buzzed. A text from Bernard. Thank you for today. For everything. For teaching me what family really means. She texted back. Thank you for taking a chance on hope. For showing us all that it's never too late to change. Another text, this one from Julian. The board approved the Bernard Cole Second Chances Fund. First disbursement goes out next week to a family you're going to love meeting. Details tomorrow. And one from Dr. Foster. Patient number 3 for the Nia protocol starts treatment next month. Tell Nia she's already helped her third person. More to come. Candace sent back thanks and good wishes to both, then put her phone down and simply breathed. And out. Peaceful. Grateful. Hopeful. In the next room, Nia slept with the butterfly necklace on her bedside table, already planning the first chapter of her Helping People book. She dreamed of courtrooms where everyone was kind, of people walking who couldn't walk before, of her mama smiling the way she smiled now, without that worry line between her eyebrows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Candace would start her new job as a PA, with all the responsibilities and learning curves that entailed. Bernard would begin his official role with the foundation. Julian would continue expanding his work. Dr. Foster would treat more patients. Judge Harrison would develop her compassion court. And Nia would start first grade, carrying with her the knowledge that children's voices matter, that caring about people can change the world, that hope is a real and powerful force. But tonight, they all rested in the peace of knowing they'd been part of something extraordinary. They'd taken pain and transformed it into purpose. They'd taken fear and transformed it into faith. They'd taken isolation and transformed it into community. In a world that often felt divided and harsh, they had created a small pocket of grace. They had proven that kindness wasn't naive, that hope wasn't foolish, that love really was stronger than fear. And it had all started with a 5-year-old girl who noticed something others missed and had the courage to speak up. Who looked at a man in a wheelchair and didn't see an obstacle or an enemy, but a person in pain who deserved compassion. Who believed, simply and completely, that people were supposed to help each other. That belief had changed everything. And it would continue changing things, rippling outward in ways none of them could fully measure. The families who would be helped by Bernard's fund. The patients who would be treated because of the Nia protocol. The cases that would be resolved through compassionate court proceedings. The children who would attend college on the scholarship program. The lives touched by the Mitchell Foundation's expanding work. All of it traced back to one moment in a courtroom when a little girl chose love over fear and proved that sometimes, just sometimes, the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. The city lights twinkled, each one a life, a story, a struggle, a hope. And in apartment 412 at Riverside Court, Candace Washington stood at her window and whispered to the night, "Thank you. For the accident that broke us. For the struggle that taught us. For the people who helped us. For the daughter who saved us. Thank you for showing us that endings can become beginnings, that pain can become purpose. And that walking toward tomorrow is always possible when you don't walk alone." Somewhere in that same city, Bernard Cole stood in his house and took a few steps just because he could, just because every step was still a small miracle, just because walking would never again be something he took for granted. And Julian Mitchell sat at his desk, looking at photos from the day and thought about his sister Rebecca, hoping she could see what her death had created. Not just a foundation but a community, not just financial help but transformed lives. not just survival but hope. The night deepened. The city slept. And tomorrow came as it always does, bringing with it new challenges and new opportunities, new pain and new healing, new struggles and new grace. But they would face it together, this unlikely family created not by blood but by compassion, not by obligation but by choice. They would walk toward tomorrow together, supporting each other, believing in each other, proving every day that kindness is not weakness, that hope is not naive, and that love, real selfless love for fellow humans, really can change the world. One child's observation in a courtroom had become a movement, a protocol, a fund, a program, a community, a legacy. And the story was far from over. It was just beginning. Because hope, once kindled, doesn't just survive. It grows. It spreads. It transforms everything it touches. And a little girl named Nia Washington, sleeping peacefully in her bed, had been the spark that started it all.